just looked at the clock, and I was like, oh wow, it's like 4:19. I'm supposed to have a live stream at 4:20, and I'm not even ready to go. So we're gonna get ready to go together. We'll be partaking together, hopefully. On your end, you can partake. On my end, I can partake. I don't even have any viewers in here yet. There's Jenny, Misfit Mayhem. Hey, look. Or, not my teeth. My, my teeth. Look at my, face, which anybody who knows me, they understand that's a big deal. Now, to shave my face because it hurts. Hey, oh, I definitely missed you, Jeff. I'm so glad that you're not in jail, buddy. So glad. Oh my goodness. I'm glad that you were out of there quickly. They said they were gonna charge you with a felony, maybe. Oh man, that just was horse crap. I would hope that you would have a good lawsuit going there. I really would. I mean, if not, we're completely lost in this country, which we are anyways. There's no doubt about it. So, can you type in there, Jeff? They lied. They lied about the felony. They're not trying to charge you with a felony. No, I'm doing something. This is legal here where I'm at, so you're gonna see the personality change come over me as I get ripped here really quick. No, I have the same personality, but I just, you know how it go. You know how it be. The medicine. I need the medicine before I walk, or I'll be in too much pain. It's medicinal. It's totally medicinal. I'll go over here though. Just in case there's any kitties in the wow. Hey, the real life Hominins. Hey, Chill and Charlie. You guys both get wrenches. Excuse me. Excuse me as I die here. That's some good stuff right there. So, I'm adding you as moderators, not so that you can snipe each other or snipe. Oh, there's Jeff Hates Pig. He's definitely got to be a moderator. It's so that y'all can hook up with each other, go to each other's channels. Hello, Jeff Hates Pigs. I still just want to marry you. I'm on a live stream. You need help? I'm on a live stream. Okay, I'm on a live stream. Okay, yeah, it's a HEPA filter. I have no idea. We don't have a machine that goes with it right now. I'll have to deal with it later. I'm on a live stream. Well, I told you 5 times I'm on a live stream. Okay. So, Jeff Hates Pig and Jeff and so I'm giving you those wrenches so that y'all can go around to each other's channels and hook up with each other. Just, head over there to everyone's channel that you can find. You should click on their name. It'll say go to channel. And yeah, go over there and say, hey, I'm at WassamattaU's right now, being totally enthralled by his excellent entertainment, but I'll be back to check on some more of your content later. So this is me saying hi. That's something like that. Leave that as a comment on one of their shorts or just whatever. That's what that's for, though. QBPB. Are you somebody that I know by a different name? QPB? Well, hello, either way. Excuse me while I kiss the sky here. Oh boy, look at how fat I'm getting. That's ridiculous. I told everybody. Hello, Tasha. Good to meet you. Summer ocean waves. Excuse me. I told everybody I couldn't get into my pants from last fall. I couldn't even zip them up. I couldn't even begin to zip them up. It was not happening. And And I was sure at first that I had just, you know, left them too close to the heater, or something had gone wrong with the pants and they were faulty. And that was my initial assessment, certain assessment, very positive assessment. And then as I tried on other pairs and etc., got second opinions, I was finally forced to acknowledge that it's actually me, my chunky butt, that I no longer, this is the first time that I've been bigger than a 34, I think, in my whole life. Yeah, and I was mad enough when I went from 33 to 34, so this is just really upsetting, disturbing and upsetting. But you know, now that the eggnog's gone for the season, it's not a problem. Okay, we're gonna get going, and we're gonna get talking about the myth of human evolution and relic hominins that still exist today. Here, one more hit. One more hit. If anyone's curious, right now I've got some lemon royale going, and I believe I have some banana mac in here as well. Let's see here. No, some runts. I got some runts up in this mug. Who wants some runts? Yeah. I left the moon rocks down in the basement in the hiding spot down there. I don't know why I hide them. It's just a habit because it used to be illegal here. Which, by the way, I'm not too ashamed to say that I used to be one of the larger indoor growers around Portland. I don't know if I was one of the larger or not. I think there were people that were, you know, quite a bit bigger than me, but I had as many as 2, 3, 4, well, with partners, some of them, but you know, rental houses around town where we had people, we put them in there, pay their first and last month's rent, pay their first couple of months rent, pay all their utilities. All they had to do was live there and, you know, keep the plants from dying. And usually their number one job was to not tell anyone about it, which almost without fail, after months of getting ready and he doesn't see that I'm live. After months of getting them ready and talking about it a million times over, oh, there's Lady Sky. Okay, you need the wrench, so you can go subscribe to various different people. So yeah, they would always, I would show up there the first time without calling or whatever, and I would tell them, you know, I would drill it into their heads. Look, I'm forking out a lot of money here, 10 grand, whatever it's going to cost me. And this is back in like 95, 96, so that was a lot more money. So, you know, the number one rule is you don't tell anybody, not your twin brother, not your best friend. Once I'm out of here after like the first 10 weeks or 20 weeks probably, it almost always worked out, then you can do what you want. But you know, the number one deal is we don't tell anybody, and you're going to get a free place to live. And then at the end of it, I'm going to pull out, and I'll leave you. If you want, you can buy my equipment out, and you can continue on if you've picked up all of my Jedi-like growing skills, and I was the best with the greenest thumb. And if you picked up my skills, then I'll leave you with all the equipment, and you can continue on your own and keep 100% of your profits and blah blah blah. You pay your own rent, your own utilities, whatever. If you need me to stay on for another one, now they would only get 5% of that first crop, which would burn a little bit, but when the time came, but they're getting first and last month's rent for free, and I'm not making them pay me back the last month's rent when I leave the situation after the 10 weeks or whatever, or usually it would be 20 weeks, 2 crops. Because I was growing a sativa, 100% sativa, which we called it the pink because it had pink-like hairs, pinkish colored hairs rather than orangish colored hairs. And it was just a good marketing name. The people would wait for the pink's coming along. And it was a 100% pure sativa, but what that means is you have to grow it a little bit bigger in order to get the yield. You can see a green with indica, but one thing about that is I was having 3,000 watt lights on a sun circle going around in a room, taking up a room, you know, almost as big as like, here, I'm going to turn the camera around. I don't know why I look at my ugly mug. So, yeah. Oh, Rancho Relaxo gets a wrench here, so you can go around and subscribe to everybody and they can subscribe to you. Yes, love Rancho. Love everyone here. Jethro. Okay, cool. Yeah, we got Juggalasis. So, anyways, yeah, they're getting a good deal out of it, and they can continue on when after the crop is done. If they've chosen to pay attention to what I'm doing and learn for themselves, then hey, they're in a house at that point, even though they didn't get much of the first crops. That's just the way it goes for my investment and the risk that I'm taking. I mean, there were so many times where I set somebody up, I got them all going, and then they did something stupid where I had to go over there and just tear it all down, even if a lot of times at their protest. But it's like, bro, you're not going to want to get busted, trust me. And what you've done is let all the neighbors know that you're growing or whatever, or your crazy ex-girlfriend who who you have that love-hate relationship. That's not going to work. That's going to get busted. Hello, Joshua. I know you. You get a wrench. Everyone gets a wrench. I'm very shortly going to get into my promised continued talk that everyone's been anticipating so on the edge of their seats about the Sasquatch and the myth of human evolution. I'm going to get into that. I just got sidetracked a little bit talking about my old way of making money. It's how I paid my way through university. I was there for over 8 years at the university, more than full-time, every single semester, 16 to 20 credit hours. I even did 24 credit hours on one single time, but they don't like it when you do that. But anyways, yeah, so I paid for all that with my growing and importing business for the most part, although I had an online business as well and an after-hours club for a while that was highly profitable, or a stake in one. Worked for Camel, worked for a restaurant, worked for a cruise ship. So I did all kinds of stuff. But, my main thing was when I needed a little money, or if I wanted to just make a lot of extra, I could put someone in the house. Probably the investment would probably cost me like 3, 4, or 5 grand actually back then. But then, 10 weeks into it, boom, we're pulling in 15 grand. And I was saying 3,000 watt lights on a sun circle. You could, in order to use up that much space, you couldn't do it with Sea of Green. You could only fit like maybe 100. I mean, you didn't want to go over 100 plants is the point. So using up that space would be about 95 plants of these sativa that I grew in a 5-gallon buckets. And like I said, you had to grow them a little bit bigger to get the yield off them. You can't Sea of Green them. So it takes a little bit longer. It's a little more inefficient. But if you were going to fill up a room that had 3,000 watts lights on it on a sun circle with Sea of Green indica, you'd be looking at having hundreds and hundreds of plants, and you didn't want to do that because that made it federal, going over 100. That's why I would always keep it at like 95 actually. And the second time that I got popped, they tried to take sticks from dead sticks and whatnot and put it into my cloning trays so that they want to make it over 100, and make it a fed case. Freaking bastards. Okay, we're going to get going on Bigfoot in here. All right. Put away the rugs, please. Hey, Dubs Wubs. Good to see you, bud. Okay, Bigfoot here. The talk about Bigfoot. It's rolling in about 30 seconds, so make sure your pants are button on tight, whatever that means. Boy, whoo-wee, that runs with something else. Whoa. Whoa. Why is the run so powerful? The runs is so powerful. Okay, here we go on the Bigfoot rock. Okay. And we're off. And this time you guys are going to be able to see, it was USA Inc.'s suggestion that I begin to do these at a time when it's still light out and people can actually see something besides just occasional flashes of my ugly face. So that's what we're going to do. You can thank him for the much prettier view that you're going to now experience. I don't have a gimbal or anything like that, so I'm just going to hold my phone while I walk, and that's what I was doing before anyways, eh? So we're going to go out here to the park. Everyone's going to see how I be living fat. Living fat in the neighborhood. Not really. This is our Ivy though. This is our corner lot house, which it's on a multi, there's room here for like a couple of fourplexes, and there's people that drop off. There's developers that drop off stuff all the time. They want to buy that property so badly. Now, this big house here next to the house, that one was a little house. We had sold them the property that that house is on, and it was a partial lot, which you couldn't sell that today. But back then, there was still a little bit of freedom left in this country, and we were able to sell off a partial lot here, and they put a little house there, a very small one, cute little house. And it had a tree in the front of the yard too that was like a historic fir tree, which is crazy because they won't allow us. They'll fine the living crap out of us, tens of thousands of dollars, if we want to cut these big trees down that are threatening to fall on our house all the time and completely block us from having any kind of a garden. But yeah, these developers that came in and they wanted to tear that little house down and build this, what we call a McMansion. They're being squeezed in all over town here. Like, my mom's house was the biggest in the neighborhood. It's not anymore with these McMansions. Like, and that was an empty lot not long ago, the one that's right in the center screen. Things like that. Anywhere where there's an empty lot, or more often than that, they're just coming in and tearing down these previous houses that were there for years and years and building these monstrosities, slipping them in there. As you'll see, this I didn't hand them my Cash App card. As you see, this one, its front door doesn't even face. Let me show you guys. I'll get up to the Bigfoot thing soon enough here, but let me show you guys. This house doesn't, its front door faces our kitchen. It's redonkulous. And the angle of their driveway going under their house into their garage basement is absolutely insane. I mean, it's just I'll show, you'll see. Picture's worth 1,000 words here, and we're gonna walk over and see this. But yeah, this is how ridiculous Portland is. So they'll let them tear down that tree, if they want to build a McMansion, because they want all that money that they're going to get it. But we can't tear down these trees, and so that we can have a garden, and so that our house feels safe from them falling down on it, which could totally happen. So here's the neighbor's house. The one that, these are nice people, I got nothing against them, and they're not the ones that had the place built. But as you can see, the front door is actually back there, facing our kitchen window. And look at the angle of the driveway. That's ridiculous. Like, anyways. So what's going on here? Brent's acting up in the chat. Are we gonna have to wrench Brent away and get rid of him? No, I did not pay my property taxes. I can't make any money. MJ is so cheap here now that it's literally on sale for like $20 for the best ounces, that like the most top quality stuff. I used to get 400 across the board from Rashid Wallace and Damon Stoudemire for a while there for my crops. And the guy that actually knew them two wasn't really me, and he was selling it to them for $4.50 across the board. So they were just paying $4.50 an ounce no matter how much there was. And now it's $20 on sale for $20 an ounce. We have so much of it that there's been a problem with people dumping it in dumpsters, local dumpsters that don't belong to them, and on the street, just on the side of the street even. There's a big field, I know right where it is. It's up by this, I live on like 37th, it's up on like 220th by this place called Lancer Lake. And the last few years, my friends have gone there. As soon as the first rain comes, they go in there and just chop down basically a very small portion of this huge field. Only the stuff that they're certain has no mold on it, which it'll happen almost immediately with the mold. So as soon as there's just, it doesn't even have to rain. As soon as it just starts to get into October and the days get wet in the morning, even if it's relatively lucky with the weather, as far as rain, you still are gonna have to take them down because the mold, there's just no helping it. Unless you have a greenhouse or something. But anyways, yeah, so no, I don't pay for it that way because there's so much of it. My friends have been going to this field that I was just talking about and literally cutting down 100 pounds of the stuff that's left behind out there. I mean, it's ridiculous. So there's no making money off that around here. And no, I didn't pay my property. The property taxes are ridiculous too, because as Brent was talking, bringing them up, because they were 11 grand last year for about $1 million home. That's ridiculous. I mean, they keep on adding these bills for the homeless, quote the homeless, and all these Californians that have moved up here instantly jump on and vote for that, and it's an increase in property tax of another $400 or $200 a year or whatever. And they just keep stacking them on, and these people keep voting for these things, and none of the money ever goes to the homeless. There's never a plan for what to do with the money that goes with the bill. So it just builds into this giant slush fund every time, and then somehow disappears. And there's some talk of auditing people and figuring out where the money went, but nothing ever comes of it. Or, for example, they had one of those where they used the money to build 440 condominium thing, and only 2 of them were considered low income, and in order to get into those, you had to make the median income for the nation, which is like 66 grand a year. That ain't helping no homeless people. That might help some family from becoming homeless who otherwise would have just been not making enough money and slipped, and out of being able to pay their bill. Maybe. But it ain't helping no homeless people. I mean, it's ridiculous. And these Californians, they just keep on voting for it. And now we're in this situation where little old lady, they don't think about, they're trying to help people, but the little old ladies and little old men and little old people everywhere that who have their houses paid off and can't afford to pay the government $1,000 a month in rent to live on their own property, or have it taken away at Pew Pew Point. BS Unleashed, you get a wrench, make sure and get around and hook up with everybody here. That's what it's for. Don't spit on the floor. And I'm sure everybody's going, just shut up and get to Bigfoot. Just shut up and get to Bigfoot. Right? I apologize. I'll do that now. Is this what's going on here, USA Inc.? All government everywhere is crooked and disgusting. You're right. From the president on down to the lowest city councils, mayors, whatever, practically down to the mail carriers. I mean, or at least definitely to the secretaries and other people, working in city halls. And it's not sustainable to have a nation where a quarter or a fifth of the people are public servants, milking the system, leeching off everybody else, and producing nothing but tyranny. And then they're in there stealing their asses off too, robbing hand over fist. So it would be bad enough just to pay the burden of all those public servants, of paying for their whole life and their kids' college, all their rent and food and every other, when they're producing nothing of any value. That would be a big enough burden. But then when they're in there just stealing everything too, that really, to say unsustainable is just a joke. I mean, it's such an understatement. And now with all of our, a lot of people don't realize, with all of our, obligations or whatever, worth 240 trillion in debt. You realize a trillion is 1,000 million, and a billion is 1,000 million. A billion is 1,000 million, and a trillion is 1,000 billion. So if you had $1,000 million homes, properties around the country, then you'd be a billionaire. If you had, oh my gosh, if It's the numbers, just most people can't even begin to conceptualize what that all means. I say we just tell the Fed, F you, we don't owe you a dime. You've caused all this problems. If anything, you owe us all this unimaginable wealth that you've collected and hoarded, including ancient technologies and superior technologies and everything else, and we're taking it all because you've been manipulating in a criminal way. You know, we'll throw somebody in a jail cell for stealing a candy bar, but we won't throw somebody in a jail cell who's deliberately manipulated the whole banking system for decades now in a criminal way so they can just steal what is just, no one would argue is anything but outright theft. And they don't, somehow we're going to cringe at the idea of putting them in a cage over someone who stole something because they were starving or whatever. Like, good grief, people. Everybody's been so brainwashed. Especially, that's what bothers me about the people on the right now. Trust me, I'm no lefty. But the people on the right are just as bad because they... maybe I shouldn't do this. Maybe I'm about to really get myself in trouble here, but... yeah, it's ridiculous. That's why I shouldn't even read the chat. I'll get going off on a tangent here. Slow down a little and see if the pic clears up, okay? Is that Bigfoot behind that bush? Team Sasquatch? Okay, people want to hear the Sasquatch. Hey, Brandon Mitchell. Good to see you, buddy. I'm going to pick up off where we left off yesterday about the Sasquatch and Bigfoot and the myth of human evolution. And, oh boy, I was just looking at my live stream and I didn't make it to the end. I meant to. I never looked at the clock. It's 4:19. Okay, so let me think. Where did I leave off? I had spoken about... okay, well, I'm going to take a little bit of a different tack. So I've spoken about how we wanted to take over the primo ecological niches, and we, therefore, we drove these creatures, these other bipedal human-like creatures, which did predate on us, and which we did fight with, and we predated on them, I'm sure, at times, and they also predated on us for mates, for reproduction. Although it seems to be the case that while that potential is there, and that a lot of the time it goes wrong and you end up with sickly kids that don't make it. Now, it's certainly true. We know we have Neanderthal DNA in most of the population, so we know that it can be done. And that's where I'll go to here next, is the fact that there are still Neanderthals on the planet to this day, and how we know that. And that ties in because of my claim that, hey, the so-called pre-human fossil record is no such thing. The so-called pre-human fossil record is the ancestors of these guys, the Neanderthals, the other hominins. So how do we know there's still Neanderthals on the planet today? You can look this up. There's a case in Takina, Russia, a little village called Takina in Russia, around the turn of the 19th century. Right, 1880 something or something like that. I don't even, right in that area. The local hunters, using a net, had captured a female, what turned out to be a Neanderthal, a female bipedal, hair-covered creature, incredibly strong. She fought like crazy, but they did get her. And I'm sure they probably couldn't have even gotten a male or even probably a full-grown female, but this was basically a teenager. And they took her back to the village, and they threw her in a hole in the ground for a couple years and threw food to her while she was still vicious. And as she went down, they eventually moved her to a cage. And then when she was fully dependent on them for food, and they had also turned her into a pretty strong alcoholic, then they let her out to just wander free around the village. Didn't want to do, because she was strong enough to pick up 2 of these hay bales. Each one of these hay bales in that area would require 2 men to use pitchforks together to pick it up and move and toss it, like into a thing or whatever. She could pick one up on each shoulder and go right up a hill, they said. And the Russian government is the one who interviewed the people who were there when this happened, studied the case. in depth, wrote in about the case in depth, and that's what these people who were alive still when she was alive said about her, that she could pick these two things of weed up. Now, she was fully hair covered, head to foot, and she refused clothing. No matter how much they tried to get her to cover her modesty or whatever. I guess she had kind of these big swinging boobs, whatever, too, sagging. But as much as they tried to get her to cover her modesty, she just refused clothing outright. There was no amount of whipping or punishment or anything that was going to get her to wear clothes. And she also became the village sex slave, basically. Bad thing. But they would basically have poker parties. For what the hunters that had captured her had technically given her as a gift to the local lord, and he would have poker parties on the weekends, and the winner would get to sleep with the Neanderthal, basically. And so she had children with multiple men of the village, a number of which didn't survive. The first two or three, I'm not sure, one of the two, she actually accidentally killed the babies because she immediately took them to the local glacial stream to wash them off, which was her instinct to do, and that was a correct instinct for her if she was having a baby that was a full Neanderthal baby. But because there was too much human in the babies, that killed them. That unalived them, I'm sorry. And so by the third or fourth baby, whichever one it was, the village women began to take the babies away from her to make sure that they would survive. And they did. She had a son named Kvit, and he had a daughter who at least 20 years ago now was still alive and somewhere here on the planet. And I think she may have even had a daughter herself. So she probably had a granddaughter still living today. Now, one thing that's interesting to note about that is her son Kvit. So when the Russian government went to study this case, this was in the 1980s that they finally got over to this little village to study this case. And when they did so, it's a Muslim area and they don't mark the graves there. So there was no way to know where Zana was her name, the Neanderthal. Zana was buried. They tried one or two spots they thought might be it, but she wasn't there, and they just weren't going to let them dig up the whole graveyard looking for her. But what people did remember was where her son Kvit was buried. And you can go online yourself and you can Google Kvit's skull juxtaposed next to human skull or something like that. Eventually, if you find the right combination of words, you'll find the picture of his skull that they were able to find in that cemetery next to a regular human skull. And now, lamestream skeptical scientists want to say he's just an extreme variation on the human norm. Yeah, real extreme. Even though in a photograph of him that you can see online, he looks fairly normal human. But the photograph is taken from the front. So you can't tell that he's got this backwards sloped forehead that they have. They don't carry their brains like where we do. They carry their brains in an area at the back of the skull called the occipital bun. Although, pound for pound, their cranial capacity, Neanderthals and any other hominins, is larger than ours. Just as a side note. But nonetheless, they don't have that forehead because they carry their brains. And that's because when you're going through one of these secondary ecological niches, these places where we've driven these creatures and they have to live now, you don't want to have that forehead sticking up because it's going to be constantly smacking on tree branches, and just getting in the way and showing where you are when you try to pick over or around things. So it's a disadvantage. But anyways, Kvit, he didn't have that from the front. His picture looks normal, but he didn't have that forehead at all, that sticking up forehead. His goes straight back. He's got a pretty good sized brow. He's a scary dude. He's not a dude you would have wanted to meet in a dark alley. He He's ugly enough to make a freight train take a dirt road. And he had a jaw that was just immense as well. You can see on the skeleton. So he's not a human. He's a hybrid. But yeah, it's interesting to know how fast the Neanderthal. So he's born looking almost human. He's got a high-pitched voice because they don't pack the gear, so to speak, as they say in the military, to be able to speak. Only humans have the ability to modulate, and that means to break up sounds into very tiny little, chop them up into very tiny little for human language. Now they actually can modulate, it turns out, and they have a very complex language. I'll get into that later. However, they can't usually mimic human speech for very long. They can maybe mimic a sentence or yell a name or something like that, and they're known for doing that, just to trick people, as are other creatures out in the wilderness that are creepy. But they can't really just the same as Coco the gorilla. She's got, or had, I don't know if she's still alive, she had a certain hundreds and hundreds of words vocabulary, basically talking and thinking about the level of a human second grader. But she's never going to be able to speak, or she was never going to be able to speak human language because she doesn't pack the gear. She just doesn't have the right type of gear to modulate, cut sounds into the type of tiny thing, syllables that we use to make our language with. And so his voice was high, especially for a big guy. He was hairy, but not like abnormal. You know, there are other humans on the planet who are just as hairy. He was extra hairy, especially for the area, but you know, not outside the human norm. He was tall, but not outside the human norm. He was strong, possibly, no one really measured, but there's a good chance he could have been heavyweight boxing champ if he would have trained from a young age. Just because his bones, even with just a slight increase towards the type of advantage that these creatures have in bone strength and density and muscle strength and density. But yeah, regardless, he had the normal rib cage, didn't have the funnel shaped rib cage and the muscles that go on top of the head. So, and then his kids, by the time you have that next generation they're basically entirely human. Like there's just really no telling that they have this recent Neanderthal, not without testing their DNA. And that's been done. So what the skeptics want to say, let me continue on. Well, no, I'll just tell you. What the skeptics want to say that Zon was, because there was a DNA test done at this time that the Russian government went to study this case there in Tukina, Russia, they ended up, that test supposedly told them that she was from a sub-Saharan African descent. Now, for one thing, it's probably the case that all bipedal creatures are ultimately going to have a sub-Saharan descent. If you go far enough back. But on top of that, there were no sub-Saharan African slaves in that part of the world at that time, or ever, that could have escaped and started some kind of a colony in the woods up there and survived in the Caucasus Mountains in the cold winters. No freaking way. These are not humans. And people from the sub-Saharan African, they're not covered in hair head to toe. They're not strong enough to lift these giant bales of hay that 4 men would need to lift. She can put one on each shoulder and go up a hill. Sub-Saharan Africans are not, their females are not 7-something feet tall. Sub-Saharan Africans, there's just nothing that makes sense about that explanation. They can't outrun a horse. They said that she could outrun any horse in the village. And, these were all children who were still, by the time the Russian government came to study the case, all the people who were alive that had been alive to meet her had been little children when they did. But, you know, they all had the same consistent descriptions. She was definitely covered in hair, head to toe. Now, how we know that she is a Neanderthal, besides all the general clues, is that she has Neanderthal feet, or the creatures of that area, the Sasquatch-like beings of that area, they have Neanderthal feet on them. And how do we know this? Well, when you look at primates, for example, gorillas have their own, you know, every gorilla's got its own unique footprint, but they all have the similar pattern in their, you know what I'm talking about, in track castings, the, oh God, you know, the little lines that you know, your footprint. I could always say that word. It's been happening to me too much lately. Anyways, and so there's people on the planet like Jimmy Chilcutt, a man named Jimmy Chilcutt, who can look at prints and say, that's a gorilla, that's an orangutan. Now, if he has a library to compare it with, he can even say this is this individual, that individual, etc. But just without that, he can look at these prints and say that's this type of primate, that's this type of primate, etc., etc. And again, I was talking yesterday, we actually know a lot about tracks because it was only 150, 200 years ago for most people's families back that we needed to know that or, you know, maybe 500, 1,000, 2,000, but not long ago, we needed to know what the tracks, we needed to be able to read the tracks in an area. It was of vital importance that we know a lot about tracks, because that way you know what there is in the area to feed your family, and you can also make sure that your family doesn't become the dinner of some other predator by reading the tracks. So we know a lot about tracks. And anyways, the dermal ridge patterns on these creatures from the Caucasus Mountains perfectly match, dermal ridge, that's the word I was looking for. They perfectly match the dermal ridge patterns from what are known Neanderthal. Nobody disputes it, that they're Neanderthal tracks. They're from a cave in Italy. And I'm going to blank on the name of the cave now too, but you can look this up. There's a cave in Italy where they found a whole bunch of Neanderthal bones, tracks, artifacts. No one disputes it. It's all Neanderthal. And the dermal ridge patterns are a match for the creatures that still exist in the Caucasus Mountains today in China and Russia. So, at the very least, they got Neanderthal feet on them, they're Neanderthals. It's also the case that if you take film footage of these things, or photographs of them that are genuine, and you put them up over the set of bones from a Neanderthal or any of the other hominins, because they're all the same, body ratio wise, the bones match perfectly. You can put a human there. A human's bones are so far off, there's no way that these could be humans in costumes. It's not possible. Not if they're moving around on film, like Patty, because her joints, her knee would be in the wrong place. Her everything but probably her heel joint would be in the wrong place. Her hip joint would be in the wrong place. Her elbow joint would be in the wrong place. And you can't fool, even with, you know, arm extensions and whatnot, that doesn't fool anything, because then your elbow doesn't bend in the middle of your arm like all primate species do, and you're a known fake, like Chewbacca. Every human in a costume who's ever appeared, who wasn't CGI enhanced, I think I talked about this 3 or 4 days ago on my live, every human in a costume that's ever played a movie monster or appeared in a photograph or any kind of video, every human subject can be identified as a human subject by measuring their body ratios, including Chewbacca and Harry from Harry and the Hendersons. They all fit normal human body ratios, just perfectly, all of them. Creature of the Black Lagoon, unless they're CGI enhanced somehow, or possibly if it's like somebody who's lost all their arms and legs and they're hooked up in some kind of contraption, maybe. Other than those very, extreme examples, unlikely examples. They're just not, they're all human. Or there's just no possibility, of fooling this measurement system. And yet, there are subjects that appear in photographs and on videos and films that are moving, even that don't fit what every movie monster played by a human ever, and every human that ever filmed all fits, doesn't fit. Not only does it not fit, we're talking about Patty, not only does she not fit, but she matches the subjects from these other purported Sasquatch films, filmed 10, decades away from each other, apart from each other by different people before the internet who didn't know each other, people in both the Eurasian continent and the North American continent. That is irrefutable proof, end of argument right there, for they exist. Anybody who can't comprehend that means that they are absolutely over, yeah, if you want to doubt what I'm telling you, then do that. But what I'm telling you is actually true, and when you go to look into it, you'll find that it's true. Every species has its own body ratio. Gorilla couldn't wear a human costume, not one that's proportional to their species. They all have their own body ratio signature that they fall within, and so that is end of argument. It's not only proof that the subjects in these particular films are real, but it's also proof that there is either a species out there, as yet unacknowledged by science species, or a set of very closely related subspecies, which is what I tend to believe. Like there's Neanderthals there in the Caucasus Mountains. Also the ones from the Orang Pendaks, with the exceptions, with the probable exception of Antarctica, although who knows what's going on there. Okay, is that a little better? Damn it, battery cutting out, huh? I'm surprised. Okay, I'm gonna slow down. I like to go fast. Okay, so I'll slow down. I don't know why I fast all the time. I was just like that when I was running too. I had to sprint or not go. Okay. CCC how you're gonna get a wrench so you can go hook up with everybody, and so is mine stretcher. If I can get this to work. I'm trying to slow down here for everyone's sake. Hold on, Stacy. I'll get you a wrench here as soon as it works again. Yeah, give it a minute here. Why isn't it working? Do I have to? Really, it's still doing it, huh? I have a 5G phone, folks. That doesn't even make sense. What if I move away from this area that I'm in, maybe? Tell me if the signal starts to get any better. Aside here in order to be able to click on Stacy Sela and make her... Oh yeah, I do. Okay. So, add as moderator. Standard moderator. Okay, Stacy, you're getting it. Wrenches for everybody. That's right. And you use those to go hook up with everybody else. Make sure and subscribe to all of our friends. That's what your wrench is for. It's not for you guys to snipe each other out. Although if you want to do that and it's funny, go ahead. You know me. I'm pretty much whatever goes kind of person. I'm not likely to crack down on very many people. Even as a mod, I'm constantly trying to save trolls rather than... Okay, line stretchers get a thing now too. Okay, you say, can you tell me where I was, Jeff? Can you tell me where I was at here? That's so rare that I lose my place like that. Oh. Okay, so I had been talking about Zama, and I'm talking... Okay. So, to continue on with Sam, she's not a sub-Saharan African. That's stupid. I don't know if the if it was just because the DNA testing was early at the time, or if this was some kind of a cover-up. I'm gonna take it back off my ugly face and let you guys watch the walk here. I don't know if that's because, you know, like I said, or if it was a cover-up of some kind, but whatever the case, they did go there, they did study this, and that's why, you know, these are Neanderthals, these things living in the Caucasus Mountains. Okay, now I'm remembering everything. I mean, that's there's to it now. There may be Neanderthals in North America. There may be in other places on the Eurasian continent. There's certainly other hominins like the Yeti, which I don't think are also Neanderthals. Now, the old picture of Neanderthals that we have been given is completely false. Most of the newest people in the anthropology field today understand this. They know that Neanderthals were hair covered. They were not hairless like we are, like they were, like we've always seen them depicted, like cavemen looking things with no hair on. No. Faces are monsters. Faces are monster primate faces. Big giant mouths, big giant nocturnal eyes. We know this from their skulls. But yet, and this is true of the pre-human fossil record too, they try to fudge the pre-human fossil record a lot. Like they'll put the shoulders out to the sides like in a human way when they're laying the bones out. One thing they can't fudge is the heads. And the skulls show these big giant nocturnal eyes and these big giant mouths full of teeth. They were monsters. And they could see in the dark and come, you know, predate on us and blah, blah, blah. And they were stronger. They may not have been the strongest hominins. It doesn't appear that they were. It appears that they were probably one of the weaker hominins, closer to human than most. But they were still, one Neanderthal was still probably between 7 and 10 feet tall. Yes, we've been lied to about their sizes as well. They generally didn't reach 10 feet tall. They were generally between 6 and 7 feet tall, though, and that's not what we've always been told, that they were shorter than us. That's horse crap. That's just not borne out by the evidence. And they had hair on them, and so, yeah. So she was a captured Neanderthal. Neanderthals still exist today, and of course they do. Of course they do. How could they go extinct while bears and cougars and lions, and I talked about this already yesterday, they didn't go extinct. Those are infinitely inferior predators. They have far less the type of intelligence to avoid human notice, and you know, less of an imperative even. They don't have any of the spooky powers that apparently Sasquatch might have. Who knows? But you know, credible people have described some pretty crazy stuff, and we know what infrasound will do to people. That's been studied. Yeah, they may be able to go in other dimensions. There's certainly some credible people, and there's also some pretty credible footage and pictures of them going in and out of what looks like portals and in and out of trees and things like that. So I don't generally talk about those things too much in depth because I just can't say anything else. I don't have the knowledge. I only know what some people have reported, and consistently different people from different times and places and blah, blah, blah. I know that, and so I'm not skeptical of most of it, but I just don't know. You know, look, before people knew what sonar was, a dolphin's ability to knock a fish out from a distance would have looked like magic to us. So a bat's ability to do what it does in the dark would have seemed like magic to us before we understood sonar. And there's a whole lot of other animal abilities in the world like that they would appear supernatural if you didn't have, you know, this particular bit of knowledge about what they were actually doing. So it may be that they're not, and it may be that going interdimensionally is something that they do, and that's not even supernatural. I mean, it may not take magic. According to some channeled extraterrestrials who did, if whether real or not, can't say, but they had some pretty amazing sounding knowledge, and They said that it's more a matter of your body's toughness, and that they have this type of strong body that can withstand traveling dimensions. And a lot of people say that that crazy smell that a lot of people report with them, sometimes it's just one of them smelling really bad, but a lot of times it seems there's a certain type of one that people describe that's more like a burnt metal. Anyways, they say, well, maybe that's actually not the creature stinking, but it's the smell of the other dimension. And on top of the images and videos that appear to show that, there's also a lot of sound recordings, and also people for years have been reporting these big metallic bang sounds in the wilderness right before they have a run-in with a Sasquatch or a dog man. That's like over and over. It took people quite a while to kind of pinpoint this too, because initially people just said it in the middle of their fantastic accounts or whatever. No one really took note of it. Like, I heard this weird metallic sound, like a big car door slamming or a big, metal gate shutting, metal door, and then, yeah, they had their encounter. Well, then, after a while, you start noticing that here and there and there and there, and all throughout historical accounts, and it's like, whoa, there's something to that. But whatever the case, I don't talk about all that supernatural stuff too in depth because I just don't have the knowledge. But yes, they are. The point is, they are so superior to these other species. How would anyone think that they would go extinct? It doesn't even make sense. Of course they didn't. Of course they're still there. And they are. They're all around us. They're, like I was talking about last night, about how huge numbers of them had died off after the Europeans brought their diseases here to the New World. That killed off a large portion of the Sasquatches, just like it did the indigenous population. And same thing happened with the Black Plague in Europe, where you see these hairy men, wild men, and all their art in churches all the way to the plague, and then as soon as the plague hits, boom, you don't hear word about them again. Well, or the ones that didn't make the association. Hey, Chevy. And but they are all around us. I don't know if it's because they've been making a comeback since that die-off from the European diseases, as they got used to them or whatever, or if it's just that the internet and cameras have allowed us to open that, and also just social acceptance. It's not quite as harsh and like career ending and everything else to come out and say you saw a Sasquatch. So it just may be the increased ability to communicate these ideas and these encounters and report them, etc., etc. Because who would you even report it to if you did see something 15, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago? You wouldn't even know who the hell to call most often. And then you wouldn't want to be ridiculed. So probably only as in almost infinite number of accounts that we have of these from people of all different walks of life, it's probably the case that only 1 in 20, 1 in 50, 1 in 100 people who had these fantastic encounters actually ever came out and reported it. And then, it got picked up enough in some mainstream way that we can actually point to it now and hear it. There's so many lost accounts. I have an account on my channel that's basically it's an account that was on YouTube, and I had made a recording of it for a girlfriend of mine years and years ago, and thank goodness I did, because it's completely vanished off YouTube. I don't know if it's somewhere else. I tried to find it and I couldn't. And yeah, so that's just one right there. That is an amazing account by a guy who is absolutely telling the truth. I feel sorry for anybody who would listen to that and think that and still somehow be skeptical that he's telling the truth. That's all there is to it. And anyways, that account ended up on the net, and it still got lost. So you can imagine, with all that we have, this amazingly rich, collection that we have of these accounts and whatnot, and a lot of them are done sworn affidavits. Like David Paulides, when he went around and interviewed all these eyewitnesses, he made every single one of them sign an affidavit saying, "I'm lying, I'm going to jail. This is fraud, and this person can sue me for a lot of money if I'm found to be lying." So, even with all that, you're still looking at a small tiny, tiny percentage of the actual encounters that have happened. So it may just be that that's what's going on, and there's now more people that know where to report something, and we have a better way of sharing it, and there's not as much stigma necessarily usually attached to it. You can kind of do it anonymous on the internet too. And yeah, so that, I don't know what the answer is. It's one of those things. But whatever the case, these things are all over the place. They're not a rare species at all. That's a big mistake that even a lot of people who understand that they exist make, thinking that these are a rare species that need protection, which I'm not necessarily saying they wouldn't need protection. Their environment, I should say, is what needs some protection. They don't really need protection. I mean, I guarantee our military can go out now and take them out when, and I know what happens because of the eyewitness accounts. When there's one that goes, kind of starts hurting people or whatever, there are these teams of people that will show up and take it out in time after time after time, account after account after account. Same with the dogmans. And some of those people who, one of those main guys that actually worked at that job, was allowed to come out as a whistleblower on a channel called Dogman and Paranormal Encounters with Jeff Nadonley. I fully believe this man, Victor, and what he reported about the Dogman. He said that we had a program to use these things as super soldiers. And the program basically failed as far as Sasquatch and Dogmans. The Sasquatch just died in captivity. The Dogmans that they took, they were able to breed them, but as soon as they would let them out into the wilderness, where they're supposedly supposed to be acting as guardians for humankind, supposedly, I know this sounds a little fantastic, but that's supposedly what they were supposed to be doing in between military assignments, is like living out in the wilds in these areas and protecting people, but also staying unseen. But they started to pack together out in the wild, and that's against their training and their programming. And so they call them back in. They've got trackers on them all, euthanize some of them and retrain other ones and send them different main types. There's a lot of different types of dogman as far as looks and whatnot, but there's two main types that people generally run across, and that's the type that looks like exactly like the werewolves from Van Helsing movie. That's what people just say time and time again. It looked exactly like that. Or there's the other type, which is the true dogman, which has a less human body, the human looking body, less human shoulders and torsos, more just a look of a large, very large dog that has evolved to stand upright. Claws, kind of like a raccoon's claws, not quite an opposable thumb. Tail. Now these other ones that don't have, and they have the reverse articulated legs from the waist down, like a dog. And those are the ones I said have been caught on camera as well, so they're definitely genuine. But and I can point that to you if anyone wants. But they actually call them werewolves. Now nobody thinks that they turn from humans into these creatures, but they're called werewolves because they look like the werewolves from Van Helsing, and they don't have a tail generally, and they have more human torso, and they're smarter. They're a lot smarter than the dogman species, the regular true dogman species. And they actually supposedly speak through mind speak English through mind speak, or they have to learn it, but they can. And so I don't know if that's 100% true or not, but this guy Victor, I pretty much believe him. I mean, boy, whatever. Call me crazy if you want. These things are definitely out there. There's no doubt about that. You gotta be crazy to deny it. And it took me a long time to accept that. I think I was just talking about that when I signed off last night. It took me a long time. For years I would say, oh yeah, I believe in Sasquatch. I know they're out there, but I don't believe in the dogman. I think that's horse crap. But eventually, it just, before that video even, I started to believe even before the video came out, just from listening to the people's accounts. People's eyewitnesses accounts can put somebody in prison. and will and has put somebody on death row. Just one person's eyewitness account of what happened. It is evidence, regardless of what most people want, or a lot of scientists want to. It is evidence, the strongest types of evidence that there is, especially when you have multiple people. There's been plenty of group, accounts of people that are just on a hike together with some kind of a hiking group, or don't even know, definitely didn't, team up to make some kind of a hoax and all tell the same story, and they all stick to the same story, and their details don't waver, and 10 years later they're all still telling us, obviously these things exist. Sorry. I mean, there's just, if you don't think so, you're crazy. Your standard of proof is just too high. And basically, at that point, even if someone were to bring, people are like, well, you need a body. Well, even if somebody were to bring a body and try to shove it in mainstream science, who would you give that body to? Because in instance after instance of people, people's accounts, if a hunter shoots and unalives one of these things, if it's cohorts, if it's the other Sasquatch that are with it or the other dogmen that are with it don't take the body away, then the government comes and takes the body away and possibly ruins you and throws you in prison. And which is not good juju. They'll prosecute you for you just defending your own life against these things. They've prosecuted people for it, saying you killed our asset, whatever. And you can look these cases up. They've happened. Now they're not admitting that in these cases that's what they're prosecuting over, but these people are telling their stories, and you look into it, and sure enough, they are facing these bizarre sounding charges. And it's obviously a cover-up. And so even if you had a body, who are you going to bring it, and who are you going to choose to just, what's your plan for how you're going to use that body, that dead body, to prove to everybody that these things exist? It's not going to work. The thing's going to get taken by the government almost immediately. You'll be lucky if you avoid murder charges, if the thing has been, unalived by anything but natural causes, by a flash flood or old age or something, which is highly unlikely. If the thing has been killed, that's a human. That's going to fit the definition of a human by almost any state's definition. You could get the electric chair. So, this is why your standard of proof is way too high if you don't already understand these things exist just from the proofs that I've given, but also the fact that there is nothing that will convince you then, because no one can even bring a body out and convince you. And it's been done. The Minnesota Iceman, that was a real body. It was, I think I talked about this the other day. It was left with scientists from the oh gosh, the big, the one that always, the Smithsonian. Scientists from the Smithsonian were allowed to come and examine this body, and they were given 72 hours, and the heat of the lights that they used were melting the ice that this thing was frozen in, and they could just smell the death and decay, the unalive and decay. Boy, it was so difficult to watch that when you're talking about certain subjects. I'm talking about fossils, and I can't even I have to use the word unalive and stuff all the time. It's ridiculous. But yeah, so that thing that I talked about this the other day on the live stream, that thing traveled, the guy that had it, however he got it, he had told different stories. First it was found by a fishing boat floating off Vietnam, then it was found here, and then it was found there, and eventually it was unalived by a hunter in Minnesota, which is how it ended up getting its final name, the Minnesota Iceman. And it had clearly been, someone had obviously shot it in the back from a distance away, probably when it wasn't even looking. And then it had laid on the ground, and this hunter that had shot it had walked up to it, at which point it was probably laying half paralyzed, partly paralyzed on the ground or whatever. It put its hand up to defend its face. The hunter fired. The round went through the hand and into the eye socket of the creature and out the back of the head, coup de grace. That was it. And it was gone. And so that's clearly, You can't fake that with a dummy. So then this guy had taken this and thrown it in ice and frozen it. And all where the wounds were from all the, from the pew pew wounds, there was like, if you've ever hunted before, you know that even for a while after you unalive an animal, that's like this pink frothy stuff, blood that comes out of the wound. And so that stuff had been coming out of his various wounds on his hand and his eye and everything, and it made little ribbons that froze in that ice going up, and then a little pool at the top. It wasn't fake, it was real. But like I said, the guy, he got overly bold about it, and he took it to Canada, which he had no problem going there. But then on the way back, some sharp border guard was like, bro, this is an unalive body that you got here. You can't, yeah. And then they were detaining him and seizing the body, and he must have known somebody big time, or somebody, probably he called somebody, and they were like, look, if you don't do something for me right now, then this is going to come out and the whole world are going to know these things are real. Whatever the case, some senator called, and this guy was released at the border, and he was allowed to take the body with him. But as he knew that he had screwed up at that point, so he went home, did something with the body. No one knows what to this day, whether it's somewhere else or whether it's chopped up or dissolved in acid, or being kept somewhere else in a freezer or whatever. Whatever the case, it's gone. And he paid like 10 grand to have a dummy made, which the dummy doesn't actually look. You can look at the pictures of it side by side. The dummy doesn't really look anything like the original. And so, anyways, there have been bodies. And so if you still can't accept that these things exist, well, then really doing yourself a big disservice, because they certainly do. They're all over the place. They're right outside the outermost of our suburban, street lights. Right past the last suburban street lights. A lot of times people that are moving into housing developments that are on the edge of suburban developments like that end up having problems with these things. They're all around our agriculture, eating up, they don't eat enough to bother a farmer, but they supplement their diet with that. Now they can eat just about anything, and they know not to bother farmers. And generally, sometimes there's places where they steal livestock and are nuisance animals and known nuisance animals, but generally speaking, they don't do that because they don't want to draw human attention, because they know what that means. It means parties of people, and that's another reason why they generally don't hurt people. Now, if you're hurt by one, it's probably because it's a male who doesn't have doesn't have a female companion, and or children, basically. And there are a number of these, of course, frustrated non-alpha males, teenagers and whatnot, that go around making trouble. They're just like people. And just like people, even among the attached males, that they're not all going to be acting out either and hurting or anything like that. I mean, just some of them are and some of them aren't. Their persons appear to vary all across the range, just like people's do. And as a matter of fact, they do so to such an extent that there are certain cases where they have seriously helped people. There's one great account of a woman who knew she had dogmans on her property. She'd seen them multiple times. She made it, and she would always come in by dark. And I can't remember what happened, if she fell asleep somewhere out in the woods or got hurt or something, but there was one she did back before dark. And she knew she had trouble, and she was going through the trail from her house. She's going down the trail of the woods, and she can hear the farmer. It's trying to kind of sneak up on her first, and eventually it does sprint at her, and she's not close enough to the house to make it. And as it gets close to her, I know this is fantastic sounding, but this appears to have happened more than once. As it's getting close to her, out of nowhere comes this, across the side of this field, like a crazed linebacker on steroids, comes this Sasquatch just barreling into this dog man as it's catching up to this old woman, and quite a, I guess, quite a vicious fight ensues, because this is like a 10 or some of these dog men, believe it or not, they reach 10, 12 feet tall. They can be huge. They're not all that big. Many of them are 5 to 7. Monstrous. Watching it was quite a battle, and again, this appears to have happened on multiple occasions. It's usually not quite as dramatic where the person's running from the dog man and the Bigfoot tackles it. It's more a case of like somebody's being menaced by the dog man, and along comes the Sasquatch and regulates, or being menaced by a Gugway or another Sasquatch that's just kind of a young, unruly psychopath teenager. The type of person would become a cop if they were a human, basically. And then some other Sasquatch steps in to regulate. They'll have a pretty harsh, they have like a system in their culture, basically, where they'll banish and like really hurt other members of, other Sasquatch that hurt humans and stuff like that in a lot of places. They seem to vary everywhere, but that definitely appears to be the case in some places in like Ontario and whatnot. So, because we've seen several cases of that. But whatever the case, they're all around us, is my point. They're every time that you go into the woods, probably, because we can see pretty much anywhere where they've been reported at, or they're known to be at, or they're likely to be at, they probably are, and they appear to kind of assign a member of their group to watch pretty much every little person or group of people that comes into their area too far. Like at some point, if the people cross, into their territory, you're gonna have one of these things like tagging along. You'll never know it's there. It's just watching you to make sure you do not up to anything, uncouth or untoward, or you're not veering too close to the nursery where they have a bunch of youngins or whatever. But I guarantee, and all of you who've been out in the deep wilderness before, you've been within 100 feet of one of these things. Know it or not. Or they've come around your camp at night to investigate, tiptoe around and investigate your stuff, or whatever. Watched you from a distance. Almost assuredly, if you're an outdoor person, that's happened. You've been within their vicinity. And as you've been driving down rural roads, or roads in the woods, or whatever, that's also happened. You've been driving right past them. I guarantee it. They're all over the place. But again, they're like, if there were Army Ranger Navy SEALs who'd been trained from birth, to be those things in your neighborhood, you live in a rural neighborhood with woods all around, you would never know that they were there if they were living out there. And those are just humans who've been like trained from birth and to be Army Ranger Navy SEALs out there. You would never know. These are infinitely stronger, better senses, better, faster brains, as I've already talked about all this. So yeah, you're generally so outmatched around them that you're just not going to know they're there. And you just got to live with that, basically. They're not likely to hurt you. It's kind of a 1 in a million case, considering how close we are to them all the time. And it looks like my battery is getting a little bit low here, and this is probably a good time for me to get ready to wind it down. This subject, maybe this is going to be a 4, 5, 6-part series. I don't know, but I'm definitely not finished. But I'm finished for tonight, I think. Probably people are getting, whatever. I'm down to 5 viewers. Yeah, okay. Finished for tonight. Thank you for tuning in, everybody. I hope I didn't miss anyone. No. Okay. I probably lost everyone. All right, screw it. I was gonna do. Goodbye, everyone. Appreciate you coming by. Sorry, I'm doing it. Peace. Love y'all. CD loves y'all. WassamattaU loves y'all. Love you. Thank you. Thank you very much. You're too kind. You're too kind.